The corridors of St. Augustine Preparatory Academy always gleamed with the shine of new money and old power, the walls adorned with plaques of alumni who had gone on to become senators, CEOs, and celebrated visionaries, and each morning the children of the elite streamed in with pressed uniforms, polished shoes, and futures already scripted for them, but among them was Alexander Harrow, son of Gregory Harrow, a billionaire who had built his empire from ruthless acquisitions and relentless ambition, and while everyone assumed Alexander would follow his father's footsteps with ease, the truth was far different, for the boy was failing in silence, collecting red-marked exams and whispered ridicule from teachers who doubted his intelligence but dared not say so aloud, fearing the wrath of Gregory's influence, and from peers who mocked him quietly behind manicured smiles, labeling him the weak link among the scions of wealth. Yet Alexander carried it all with a heavy heart, masking his despair with arrogance at times, with apathy at others, until the weight of unspoken expectations threatened to suffocate him. He had tutors flown in from Europe, specialists brought from Ivy League schools, all of whom tried to drill knowledge into him, but none could pierce the fog of anxiety and pressure that clouded his mind, and when his father looked at him with icy disappointment after yet another failing report card, Alexander felt as though he were nothing but a burden in a mansion filled with gilded rooms and hollow affection. So he began staying late at school, avoiding the limousine that waited for him, wandering the halls like a ghost long after the bell had rung, and it was in those late hours that he first noticed Samuel Green, the school janitor, a tall, broad-shouldered black man with calloused hands and a quiet dignity, a man who moved as though time itself bowed to his rhythm, pushing his mop down the long marble hallways while humming songs that Alexander did not know, songs that carried warmth and sorrow, resilience and peace, all in one, and something about that presence drew Alexander in, though at first he would never have admitted it, for he had been raised in a world that overlooked men like Samuel, men who worked in shadows while others basked in the light. But one evening, after receiving a particularly harsh scolding from his mathematics teacher and another message from his father that began with, "You have failed me again," Alexander dropped his bag in frustration at the end of the hall, scattering papers across the polished floor, and there it was, right in front of Samuel, that the facade cracked, and Alexander slumped against the lockers, covering his face with his hands, ready to drown in shame, but instead of stepping around him or treating him as just another spoiled boy, Samuel bent down, picked up one of the crumpled exams, studied it for a moment, and looked at Alexander with eyes that saw deeper than grades and wealth, and he asked in a voice both calm and unyielding, "What's the one thing you know better than anybody else?" A question that startled Alexander, for it was not ridicule, not pity, not empty encouragement, but a challenge that cut straight to the truth, and Alexander, still stunned, could not answer, only stammered that he didn't know, that he wasn't good at anything, that he was nothing but a disappointment, and Samuel just chuckled softly, shaking his head, replying, "That's the lie they've sold you, son, and you've bought it. But the first lesson ain't about what you don't know, it's about finding the rhythm in what you do," words that Alexander didn't yet understand but felt like a key turning in a locked door. From that night forward, Alexander found himself drawn back to the janitor's presence, lingering after hours under the pretense of needing quiet to study, though in truth he craved the lessons that came not from textbooks but from Samuel's stories, stories about growing up in the South where opportunities were scarce, where every step forward required twice the effort just to be seen, about how he had failed classes himself until he realized that knowledge was like music, a pattern, a rhythm. And once you learned the beat, you could dance with it instead of fighting against it, and Samuel would demonstrate by tapping his mop handle like a drum, breaking down equations into beats, turning words into rhythms, showing Alexander that learning wasn't about memorization but about flow, connection, patience, and the more he listened, the more Alexander began to change, though it was not overnight, for there were still days when he failed, still days when he wanted to give up, but Samuel would remind him that failure was not the end but the tempo of progress, and slowly, the boy who had been drowning in shame began to surface, and in that dimly lit hallway between the lockers and the echo of cleaning equipment, Alexander Harrow was being remade, not into the image of his father, not into the spoiled heir his classmates mocked, but into someone who might finally discover his own strength, his own rhythm, guided by the one secret that Samuel Green, a man the world overlooked. Carried within him like a torch, that true learning begins not with what others demand you know, but with discovering the song that already lives inside you, waiting to be heard.